donning a holy flaming sword and the motif of Archangel Uriel of Repentance. It is URL00 Uriel, with the kit of All Restore, Panic, Punishment, Biped Legs, and the leg ability of All Rounder, which buffs leg speed if all equipped skills are of different types. Now, as essentially the third model of a Holy Archangel series we've been seeing for a while, the first two being Gabrivan and Milgnus respectively, Uriel in particular is most certainly not pulling any punches and most certainly picking up where Milgnus left off in terms of just how dangerous that he can be on the battlefield, especially with a very, very aggressive ailment-based kit that he comes packing with, between a skill that was previously collab only and a new skill on top of that which amps up his ailment game even worse on top of that. All Restore on the head part is a healing skill that, once activated, will restore one broken part to himself and each ally across the team. This can be very handy for spot repairing parts of all allies more than once, instead of having to rely on, say, Reverse or First Aid or Basic Restore over multiple turns just to complete the same effect. In this case, All Restore basically allows you to restore all allies at once, one part at a time. Even though he only has 3 uses, having parts on the field even at 10% HP is still far better than not having them at all. Panic on the right arm, and the first instance of this skill that is not on a collab model, the first of which being Queen Honey from the recently finished Railgun collab design. Panic has 2 skills based on how it's used. If you catch a foe in their heat phase upon attacking them, it basically serves as Slip, which will force them to start their cooldown phase right where you catch them and effectively waste their turn. If you catch a foe in cooldown phase instead, you instead will inflict them with Metaforce Seal, which prevents them from being able to unleash Metaforce. They can charge it, but they just can't unleash it. Punishment on the left arm is a brand new skill being introduced in the game. It's most certainly going to absolutely step up the ailment game of pretty much anyone that does plan to use it. And it also serves as the antithesis and counterpart to Sujigiri. While in particular with Sujigiri, it is a ×3 damage bonus when attacking a foe from its backside, Punishment instead rewards you for tackling your opponent head on. They times 1.5 damage bonus to a forward-facing foe, but punishes you with a 50% damage reduction if attacking a rear-facing foe. In addition, it will also inflict 1 random debuff onto the enemy upon attacking them. This can be anything from Bug, to Thunder, to Fire, to even Metaphor Seal on top of that. And because it's a random choice, you can effectively land more than one of these and stack effects relative to the number of times you strike them. Again, of course, it is also encouraged that you catch a foe in their heat phase when using this, but the ailments in particular will also serve as a forgivement to this, even if you decide, or even if you are a little slow or fail to catch them quick enough. Biped Legs means that Uriel will have a very solid coverage across all terrains, as Biped gives the most well-rounded in terms of terrain matching, and the stats across the board too give it a pretty fair HP pool and stat spread as well. In particular, with a head HP of about 3,800, right arm about 3,000, left arm at 3,100, and legs at 4,000, pretty healthy HP pool there, even if the right arm is just a little squishy there, just shy of 3,000, and the left at 3,100. Much of the HP will be pulled between the head and legs in particular. Base power also is pretty nasty too, with Punishment boasting a base almost 1,400 before modifiers. And with Panic, again being another ailment, you really don't have to worry about damage all that much with that one at just shy of 800. But heat and cool stats between the two of these is actually pretty nasty too, boasting easily starting at the low 700s, with the exception of Punishment's cooldown in the high 500s. Leg stats are honestly pretty solid too overall, with a mobility of 901, very solid base speed across the board you generally can't ever go wrong with. An evade of almost 1300 means he will have a pretty fair time dodging or grazing a lot of incoming attacks. A melee resist of 786, just almost 800, is kind of going to be a pain point for Uriel, as it does mean that he will take a pretty significantly higher amount of damage from incoming melee fighters with the lack of that bonus. However, he does comp it with a pretty solid and chunky shoot resist at just over 1100, which means he can very easily hold his own from that enemy taking pot shots more than he can that ally trying to get in his face. All this being said, though, as a pure set score, I still do have to rate Uriel a pretty solid 8 out of 10. Pretty above average stats, very healthy armor pool, especially between the head and legs, well-rounded and pretty synergetic too, if I'm being completely honest with you, and probably the first of a lot of ailment fighters that actually does what Uriel does exclusively. Normally, you'd have to spread ailments across all three or a multitude of all three of your parts, whereas with punishment, you have basically the option of 4 at random in one move. And panic, even if you catch a foe and cooldown with Metaphor Seal, still gives you the option of slip if you are fast enough to make use of it. The only real weakness in particular to this is anyone that is using Stat Cleanse, of course, which will negate a good chunk of what Uriel brings to the field. But as long as you can either remove it or brute force it, since now it only lasts about 1 to 2 turns, it honestly means that you can kind of turn it around and make use of it very easily. The only other real thing that you have to pay attention to with Uriel is the Metal Mastery, because it is an all-rounder type. But given that we can also now overclock metals up to level 200, this can be skirted pretty easily once you hit that late stage gameplay. As mixed parts score, I do very easily have to rate him equally at an 8 out of 10. Given that even though Panic you may or may not use super often, All Restore will have its uses absolutely, and even though biped legs with All Rounder are kind of niche, the left arm of Punishment with that Flaming Sword is absolutely going to be the big MVP part on him. So if you are going to go after Uriel, or you only manage to snag one part, if you do manage to collect the Flaming Sword of Punishment, I would say you could call that a win and call it a day.